They'll burn everything if you help me. Those were the first words she spoke. Tied to a maple tree under the moonlight, blood on her wrists, voice trembling, but eyes still burning with something fiercer than fear. It was Wyoming, 1876. The wind that night cut like a knife across the plains, carrying with it the ghost howl of coyotes and the bite of frost that slipped through every crack in the wood. The prairie stretched wide and empty under a silver sky, and Amos Cain, solitary, silent, and long past redemption, sat by the fire in his small cabin. He hadn't spoken to another soul in 3 weeks, and he liked it that way. Until he heard her. The cry wasn't loud, but it sliced through the night like it was meant for him alone. Short, ragged, desperate. He froze, the sound snapping through years of trained instinct. Then he moved, rifle slung across his shoulder, knife in hand, lantern swinging in his grip. It led him to the edge of his land, to the base of a massive old maple, where snow still clung to the roots. And there she was. A girl, barely more than a child, Cherokee, bound with rough rope that bit into her arms. Her hair clung to her bloodied cheek, her ankles bruised, her dress torn. She looked at him like she wasn't sure whether he was a savior or a new kind of monster. "They'll burn everything if you help me," she whispered again, barely above the wind. Amos didn't answer. He simply pulled the knife from his belt and cut the ropes in silence. She collapsed into his arms. He carried her back through wind and through frost, back to the cabin that had only ever held one life. A place of guilt, of self-imposed exile. But that night, it became something else. Inside, he lit the fire higher, fetched water, cleaned her wounds with hands more used to breaking things than mending. She didn't cry, and he didn't ask her name. He just wrapped her in his mother's old Cherokee blanket, worn thin but still warm, and set a cup of heated water by her side. "They'll come for me," she said, after a while. "They always do." Amos stood by the window. He saw torches in the distance flickering like angry stars on the move. "Then they'll have to come through me," he said. And with that, the first crack of something unspoken echoed between them. Not trust, not yet, but something that might someday become it. Some stories don't begin with love or laughter or even words. They begin with a choice. To step in. To not look away. To cut a rope in the middle of the night when the world says it's safer to let her hang. But Amos Cain had never been one to follow rules. Not anymore. So tell me, have you ever made a choice that changed everything? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear what corner of the world you're in as we ride together into this story, because it's just getting started. Sometimes the first shelter we find isn't a roof overhead. It's the way someone chooses to stay. The fire inside Amos Cain's cabin crackled low flickering shadows across the log walls, like the ghosts of memories neither of them wanted to name. Nanyahhei, she'd finally told him her name, though only once, softly sat wrapped in his mother's old blanket, knees drawn tight to her chest, eyes following him with quiet caution. The cabin had never held another soul overnight. Not in the 5 years since Amos hung up his mercenary coat and stopped carving notches into his rifle stock. The extra chair had always just gathered dust. The table sat with only one bowl. But that night, he made soup for 2. He peeled potatoes with practiced hands, scarred steady, the kind that had once taken lives, now trying to save one. He stirred slowly, the scent of roots and boiled rabbit rising in the air. The girl didn't speak, but her shoulders eased as warmth crept back into her limbs. He didn't ask questions, not yet. Not about the bruises on her neck or the whip welts barely hidden beneath her torn dress. Instead, he handed her the tin cup. Drink, he said simply. Her hands shook as she reached for it. Not from the cold anymore. From memory. My stepfather sold me, she whispered. Said a girl like me was worth more than cattle. Amos didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. But hearing it from her set something burning beneath his ribs. He ladled soup into a wooden bowl and passed it to her, careful not to touch her skin. Not until she was ready. I've known men like that, he said quietly, watching the flames. And I've buried a few. Silence lingered between them, thick as smoke. Then after a long minute, she spoke again. My people, the Cherokee, they wouldn't let the horse thieves cross our land. So they took me instead. Said I'd be payment enough. For passage, for pleasure, for silence. Amos clenched his jaw. He had no words for that. Only the memory of the men he'd followed during the war, who'd said the same things about land and women, about what was owed and what was taken. He rose and opened a chest by the wall. Inside he pulled a hat, soft leather cracked from weather and time. It had belonged to his mother. She'd worn it through snowstorms, through grief, through years of surviving a world that never made room for women like her. He held it out. This kept her warm in the coldest winter I ever saw. It'll do the same for you. Nanyahhei reached out slowly. Her fingers brushed his. And for a moment, something shifted. A thread of trust. Fragile but real. She put on the hat, adjusting it carefully. Not to hide, but to stand taller. That small act, just a girl putting on a hat, felt bigger than anything Amos had seen on a battlefield. Outside, the wind howled again, and in the distance, torches, closer now, flickering like wolves' eyes. The riders were returning. He glanced toward the window, jaw set, heart steady. They're coming tonight, he said. Nani's hand went to the knife he'd given her. They always do. But this time, she wasn't alone. And if you're still watching, let me know in the comments. What do you think gives someone strength when everything else is broken? I'm reading every word. Some wounds bleed on the inside long after the bruises fade. And sometimes the only person who understands is a stranger carrying one of their own. The wind outside battered the shutters of Amos Cain's cabin like a warning trying to get in. Inside, the fire burned low, the kind of quiet glow that made everything feel closer, more exposed. Nanyahhei sat cross-legged on the floor, now the woolen blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, but the knife he gave her no longer clutched like a lifeline. It rested beside her knee, close but not clenched. They didn't speak for a while. The silence between them was the kind of silence that only exists between people who know what it means to be betrayed by someone they once called family. I was 12, Amos said, finally, eyes fixed on the flames, when my father traded me to a war company for 3 barrels of whiskey. Said I'd be safer with them than under his roof. Said men like me don't need mothers. Nani didn't move, didn't interrupt. But her hand slowly reached out, placed the knife back into its sheath. They taught me to shoot. Amos' continued, voice low and rough. To track, to kill. I was good at it. Too good. And by the time I realized I'd become what he sold me to be, there wasn't much of me left worth saving. Nani's eyes didn't leave his face. Her voice was soft but sure. My stepfather said I smiled too much, laughed too loud, said I had too much pride to be raised right. So he drank it away, then gave me to the men who burned our fields. She paused, fingers curling slightly against her knee. But I remember my mother's hands, braiding my hair, singing while she worked. She said my name meant one who walks the path, and that I'd have to choose which direction. The fire popped. Sparks danced up the chimney like embers trying to be stars. Amos reached into a drawer and pulled out a piece of carved maple, delicate smooth, shaped like a leaf. He turned it in his fingers once before handing it to her. "She gave me this," he said. "My mother. The only thing left after they burned our home. I never gave it to anyone. But maybe it's meant for someone who knows what it means to lose everything." Nani took it slowly, held it to her chest. She didn't cry, but her eyes shimmered in the firelight. There were no vows spoken, no promises made. But between them, in the glow of that fire, two people who had been broken by others began to stitch something new, something fragile, something worth defending. Outside, the wind shifted. The torches had disappeared again, but Amos knew they were still out there, waiting. But now someone was waiting with him. If that part of the story touched something in you, if you've ever carried pain that didn't show on your skin, hit the like button to let others know they're not alone. Share this with someone who still believes healing can come in the quiet. And tell me in the comments what name or memory still gives you strength. It's never the first storm that breaks a man. It's the one that comes when he thinks the sky's finally cleared. Amos Cain had seen too many mornings like this, too quiet, too still, the kind that made your gut knot before your brain knew why. He stood on the porch, one hand wrapped around a chipped coffee tin, the other resting on the rifle leaning against the cabin wall. Inside, Nanyahhei stirred the coals in the firebox, humming a Cherokee lullaby under her breath. The same tune she'd sung the night before when neither of them could sleep, when they both knew something was coming, but pretended they didn't. Amos didn't have to guess. He'd seen the hoofprints by the riverbank, fresh, deliberate 6 riders at least. They hadn't come to scout. They'd come to finish what they started. He glanced over his shoulder. Through the open doorway, he could see Nanyahhei's back turned, her hair still damp from the morning wash, the maple leaf carving tucked into the folds of her blanket. A girl who once shook, holding a blade, now moved with quiet certainty. But she wasn't ready for this, not yet. And he knew Voss wouldn't wait any longer. The sound came first, low and distant. Hooves. Then the smell, smoke on the wind. He didn't say a word, just stepped back inside and placed the coffee down. His hand reached for the rifle, checked the chamber. 5 rounds. Clean. Ready. Nani turned, catching the shift in his shoulders the way his gaze had gone hard. "They're here, aren't they?" He nodded. "Should I?" He crossed the room in 2 steps, handed her the second rifle, the smaller one he'd kept from his days riding escort across Dakota rail lines. "You remember what I told you?" She nodded once. "Breathe. Aim low. Don't hesitate." He almost smiled. "Good." They moved together without words. He to the door, she to the side window. The cabin, once a shell of loneliness, now held the weight of something worth protecting. And when the first rider crested the rise, a silhouette against the dawn, Amos didn't blink. He recognized the coat, the way the man's hand never strayed far from his hip. Voss's second son. The kind of man who smiled before he hurt you. "Cain," the voice called out. "We're not here for a war. Just give us the girl." Amos stepped into the doorway, rifle resting in the crook of his arm like it belonged there. "She's not yours to take," he said, voice even almost gentle. "Then you'll both burn," the man replied. A second rider lit a torch. From inside the cabin, a shot cracked. The torch dropped, snuffed out in the dirt. Nanyahhei's voice called through the smoke. "You missed your chance." And just like that, the standoff broke. Hooves thundered. Amos fired once, dropping the lead rider. Another shot from the cabin caught one in the leg. They weren't ready. They never expected the girl to shoot. As the riders scattered, dragging the wounded with them, Amos lowered his rifle, breath steady, but heart-hammering. Inside, Nanyahhei reloaded with shaking fingers, but her eyes were clear. "They'll come back," she said. "Yes," Amos replied, watching the trail where the dust hadn't yet settled. "But next time they won't just find a cabin." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just a girl who'd been tied to a tree, but a woman who stood her ground. "They'll find a line they can't cross. If you're still with us, I'd love to know. Where are you tuning in from tonight? Drop your town or state in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Wild West stories of grit, grace, and second chances. Some names are given at birth. Others are earned when someone fights to call you home. The air still smelled like gunpowder and pine sap when the riders disappeared over the ridge. Smoke from the failed torch still curled near the cabin steps, but the fire hadn't caught. Not yet. Amos Cain stood at the door, rifle lowered, but not forgotten, eyes locked on the path they'd come from, because a man like Voss never sent one group without keeping another close behind. Inside, Nanyahhei sat on the floor near the hearth, her rifle across her knees. Her chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm, the same way a drum calms after battle. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She'd fired a warning. Not just to them, but to the girl she used to be. Then came the sound that didn't belong. Low rhythmic hoofbeats, but different. Lighter. Controlled. Amos moved to the porch, his breath sharp in his lungs. From the trees they emerged, not riders in chaos, but shadows with purpose. 5 of them. Cherokee. Their paint was ash and riverstone, their horses silent as wind. And leading them, a woman. She rode straight-backed, long braid wrapped in deerskin feathers at her wrist. Her face was carved from something older than anger, and in her eyes steel and moonlight. She dismounted in one motion, walking forward like she'd always belonged to the land. Her gaze locked on the cabin door, unflinching. Then Nanyahhei stepped out. For a moment, just a moment, the woman's breath caught. "Nanyahhei," she said, her voice not loud, not weak, a question asked with both hope and fear. Nani froze, rifle slipping from her lap. Her hands twitched, her throat tightened. She tried to speak, failed, then tried again. "Mother." The woman crossed the ground in 4 strides and pulled her daughter into an embrace that didn't ask permission. Nani stiffened just for a second and then collapsed into it. Her mother's arms weren't gentle, but they were whole. They didn't tremble. They didn't apologize. "I thought you were gone," the woman whispered into her hair. "I thought I'd been forgotten," Nani replied. Behind them, the warriors waited in silence, eyes scanning the tree-line, bodies still. Amos stayed on the porch, rifle lowered, letting the moment stretch between the women like smoke and cold air. Her mother pulled back slightly, eyes sharp again. "Did they harm you?" Nani nodded once. "They tried." "Did you let them break you?" "No." That answer was enough. They stepped into the cabin. The warriors remained outside. Amos cleared his throat. "She fought them," he said, voice gruff. Didn't flinch. Her mother turned to him, studying him in a way that felt less like judgment and more like inventory. "You helped her, I found her. Did you protect her? I tried. Do you still?" Amos hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." The woman's gaze lingered a beat longer, then softened, not much, just enough. She extended a hand, not in greeting but in recognition. "My name is Cioya," she said, "daughter of Flint River, mother of the one who walks the path." "I'm Amos Cain," he replied. "I used to walk the wrong one." Something like respect passed between them, wordless and real. Nani stepped forward again, her hand still resting lightly on her mother's arm. "They'll come back," she said. Cioya nodded. "Then they'll meet us." If this part stirred something in you, if you've ever longed for the arms of someone who once called your name when the world went dark, drop A in the comments. And if you're still watching, I'd love to know what's your name story, who gave it meaning. Some truths can mend a soul. Others must tear one open first. That night, the sky was a blanket of stars stretched so wide and clear it almost hurt to look at. The fire outside Amos Cain's cabin had burned low, its glow dancing over the faces of people who'd once been strangers and now sat in fragile, growing trust. The Cherokee warriors remained close, quiet sentinels. Amos had offered them shelter. They'd accepted it with nods and silence. Cioya stood watch beyond the maple tree, her figure still and strong beneath the moonlight. Nanyahhei sat with Amos on the porch, knees drawn to her chest, her back warmed by the fire behind them. Neither spoke at first. Sometimes it was enough to hear the other breathing, but Amos felt it. That pull in his chest. That knot that wouldn't untangle unless he cut it himself. "Nani," he said quietly. She looked over, eyes dark and searching. "There's something I haven't told you. Something I should have said that first night by the fire." She didn't interrupt. She just waited. He exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that felt like dragging a boulder up a mountain. "Your mother's name," he said. "It wasn't new to me." Her brow furrowed, confused. "I knew it from years ago," he continued, voice low, rougher now. "During the war, I rode with a company that took contracts. From the army, from rail barons, from men like Voss. I didn't ask questions. I just followed orders. That's what I told myself." Nanyahhei sat up straighter. Her hands curled slightly. "Near Flint River, we were told to push back a group standing in the way of progress. That's what the paper said. But it wasn't a fight. It was a massacre." His voice broke. "I killed a boy. Maybe 16. Maybe less. He had a stone knife shaking in his hand. I shot him before he got close enough to speak. When I searched him, he carried a beaded strip with your mother's name stitched into it." Nani's breath hitched. Her fingers tightened on the porch railing, but she didn't move away. "I left that company the next day," Amos said. "Tossed my badge, rode north, drank myself numb until the guilt settled into something I could carry." He turned to her. "Fully. So when I found you under that tree, I knew whose child you were." Her eyes welled, but not with tears, not yet. Her voice was a whisper. "You carried that all this time," Amos nodded. "And you still saved me because I couldn't save him." Silence fell heavy between them. The fire popped behind her. A breeze stirred the leaves above as if the tree itself were listening. Finally, she spoke. "You could have lied. I almost did. But you didn't." "No." She looked out toward the prairie to where her mother still stood in the dark, like a statue carved by wind and time. "I saw that scar on your hand," she said quietly. "The one from the Flint River fight. I always wondered if the man who gave it to you remembered who he was." Now she looked at him. Not with anger, not quite with forgiveness, but with something deeper recognition. "You do," she whispered. "That's why I can't hate you." Amos closed his eyes, just for a moment, because that hurt more than blame ever could. "You don't have to trust me," he said, "but I needed you to know." Nanyahhei reached out, placed the carved maple leaf between them on the porch. "I don't know what this means yet," she said, voice steady now, "but I didn't come this far to run from truth." Amos nodded, jaw tight. Then from the edge of the dark, Sioya's voice broke the quiet. "They're coming. It's one thing to survive a fire. It's another to rebuild where it burned." By morning the smoke had cleared. Only embers remained where Amos Cain's stable once stood, a jagged skeleton of charred beams and scorched earth. The porch bore black stains. The tree line beyond still whispered with the hoofbeats of riders who never made it back. But the cabin still stood, and so did they. Nanyahhei sat on the porch steps, the maple leaf carving in one hand, a rifle across her lap. Her mother Sioya leaned against the rail beside her, arms, crossed eyes, distant. Amos stood a few paces off, hammering a loose board back into place like the act of building might steady his breath. Then came the sound no one expected, wagon wheels. From the west trail a cart rolled slowly into view. 2 mules, sun-faded canvas, and behind the reins, Eliza Moore. She waved once. No smile. But she came. Behind her, Tom Grayson, the blacksmith, walked with a limp and a tool belt slung low across his hip. And behind him, 3 ranch hands from the edge of Willow Creek, carrying buckets, rope, and timber across their shoulders. Amos stepped down from the porch, brows furrowed. "You're early." Eliza hopped from the wagon. "You're lucky we're late," she said, brushing dust from her skirt. "If we'd gotten here yesterday, we might have been too scared to help." Nani rose slowly. Her eyes met Eliza's, not soft, not cold, just searching. "I saw the smoke from town," Eliza said. "Heard whispers. But whispers don't rebuild roofs." Sioya stepped forward, her shadow long across the clearing. Eliza's breath caught, but she didn't back down, just nodded. Tom Grayson grunted, stepping up to Amos. "You got hammers in the shed. I'll need nails too." They moved like clockwork. Quiet, coordinated, a little stiff at first, but not cold. One ranch hand asked where the well was. Another fetched extra timber. A young woman knelt beside Nanyahhei and offered her a leather pouch of herbs. "For the burns," she said gently. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. By midday, the sound of hammers rang through the clearing. Not like gunfire, but rhythm. Building. Steady. Amos watched from the shade, hands resting on his hips. Nani moved among them now, helping with water, holding nails steady, showing a small girl how to twist rope. Even Sioya softened just enough to speak to Eliza, sharing a story in low Cherokee tones. And Eliza listened. Later that evening, they ate together. Not a feast, just cornbread beans and fire-roasted squash. But it was passed hand to hand. No one sat alone. Amos looked up from his plate and caught Nani smiling. Not at him, not because of him, but because she felt there. Not just tolerated, included. And that mattered more than any rifle ever could. Some nights don't ask if you're ready. They just arrive and see who stands after the smoke clears. The wind changed after sundown. The hammers had gone quiet. The last board had been nailed. But something in the air shifted, a stillness too sharp to be peace. Amos Cain felt it first. A hunter's sense. The kind that rises in a man who's seen war come wearing the face of calm. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching softly over fresh-laid gravel. The moon hung low, orange and watchful. In the shadows near the rebuilt stable, Nanyahhei paused mid-step, her hand falling to the eagle knife at her belt. Seoya emerged from the trees, eyes narrowed. The other Cherokee warriors had already taken their places, not needing to be told. This land may not have been theirs on paper, but it had become something sacred in the fight. Inside the cabin, Eliza Moore blew out the lantern. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. And then it came. A flicker on the far ridge. Torches. Again. But this time, not 4 riders, not even 6. 9 men, 2 wagons, barrels sloshing with kerosene. And in the lead, Caleb Voss himself. His voice cut through the night like a rusted blade. "You think a few farmers and painted savages can stop what's owed?" Amos stepped forward, rifle loose in his hands, not raised. "This land's not owed, it's home." Voss sneered, stepping from his wagon. "Then you can burn with it." He waved a hand. The men fanned out torches, lighting the tall grass. That's when the line was drawn, not with ink, but with footsteps. Tom Grayson moved to Amos's side, a sledgehammer over his shoulder. Eliza, behind the porch rail, cocked her father's old shotgun. The Cherokee warriors flanked the cabin in silence, boughs drawn their shadows, tall in the firelight. And in the center of it all stood Nanyahhei. No longer a girl tied to a tree, no longer someone passed between men like coin. Now she stood with her tribe, with her neighbors, with her own fire burning steady behind her eyes. She raised her rifle, not one step further. Voss laughed. "You think that little speech makes you one of them?" "I don't need to be one of anything," she replied. "This land chose me back." "That's enough." One of Voss's men broke ranks, young, scared. His torch slipped, hitting the dry grass. Flames licked up instantly, snaking toward the cabin. Amos didn't flinch. He fired once clean and the boy dropped. Seoya let loose an arrow. Then the prairie exploded. Gunfire. Screams. Smoke churned like a beast unleashed. But this time they didn't scatter. This time they stood shoulder to shoulder, white settlers, Cherokee warriors, a girl who'd learned to aim, and a man who'd once only known how to run. Amos fought like a man reclaiming something stolen. Nanyahhei moved with precision, her bullets not for rage but for protection. And Voss. He ran, just like before. Into the fire he started. By dawn the grass smoldered. The cabin still stood, but more importantly so did they. Not all wounds bleed. Some heal slow in silence with hands and with wood. The morning after the fire felt different. Not just because they'd won, but because they'd survived together. Ash still clung to the porch beams. The stables smoldered again, only this time from cleanup, not destruction. Amos Cain stood beneath the old maple tree with a knife in one hand and a block of smooth oak in the other. The blade moved in slow, careful strokes, not like a man whittling to pass time, but like a man carving away ghosts. Beside him sat Nanyahhei, cross-legged in the grass, her own carving in progress. A piece of sycamore lay across her lap, a small eagle slowly taking shape beneath her steady hands. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. Around them, Willow Creek folk helped the Cherokee rebuild a fence line. Eliza brought bread again, this time with a smile. Tom Grayson sharpened tools, humming low. And Seoya, she watched her daughter with quiet pride. It was Amos who broke the silence first. "Didn't think I'd live long enough to carve something worth keeping." Nanyahhei glanced at him. "You always could. You just never had something worth carving for." He paused, the knife still in his fingers. Then he nodded once, as if the truth needed no argument. By midday, 2 figures began to take shape. his an intricate maple leaf veins etched like rivers. Hers an eagle in flight wings spread talons open as if about to land. They mounted both on a cedar post just beyond the tree where Amos had first found her. Cioya approached, laying one hand on each carving. She spoke in Cherokee soft sacred. The wind carried her words, and though most couldn't understand them, the meaning didn't need translation. This was a totem, yes, but more than that, it was a truth in wood. Not a monument to blood, not to pain, but to the two lives that had chosen to remain and to rebuild. Eliza stepped closer. "What's it mean?" Amos didn't answer right away. Then he nodded to Nanyahhei. "You tell her." Nani stood tall. "The leaf is for the land that gave him a second chance," she said, her voice clear. "The eagle is for the freedom I took back when I stopped running." Tom Grayson, wiping sweat from his brow, let out a soft grunt of approval. "Could use one of those at the town hall." Someone chuckled. And for the first time in a long time, laughter wasn't strange here. It belonged. Amos turned to Nani as the wind stirred the carvings gently. "What do we call it?" She looked at him then, at the maple tree, its leaves shimmering in the sun. "Let the land decide," she said. And just like that, the totem stood, no sign, no plaque. Just two symbols carved in silence by two people who had every reason to give up, but didn't. Some places don't just heal the people, they remember them. Weeks passed, and the Wyoming prairie began to bloom again. Spring crept in slow, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. But it came anyway, stubborn, gentle, and full of color. The burned-out stable had been rebuilt, the fences mended. But it wasn't the repairs, wows, that marked the change. It was the sound. Children laughing in the fields, horses snorting near the trough, the hum of Cherokee songs drifting from the porch at dusk. And sometimes, when the wind caught just right, the soft thud of Amos Cain's boots as he walked the land, not in search of danger, but in quiet routine. The totem stood firm near the old maple tree, the leaf an eagle now weathered by sun and wind, but proud. Passers-by would pause to look at it, not asking questions, just knowing something had happened here that mattered. Inside the cabin, Nanyahhei sat with two girls from town, showing them how to twist thin sinew into bowstring. Her fingers moved with care, the maple leaf necklace glinting against her collarbone. The girls listened wide-eyed, laughing, when she joked, quiet when she didn't. Amos watched from the doorway, arms folded. "Never thought I'd see the day this place had giggles in it," he muttered with a faint smile. Nani looked up, smirking. "Might want to get used to it. Laughter's cheaper than bullets." He chuckled and nodded, stepping into the warmth. That evening they shared stew with Eliza Moore and Tom Grayson, who had brought his youngest son along just to see the woman who outshot two of Voss's men and still smiled after. The porch glowed with lantern light, the sound of spoons on tin bowls, the creak of the rocker, where Cioya sat silently carving something new into a length of birch. Amos poured coffee for her. "You staying long?" Cioya nodded once. "Long enough to see what you do next." And he didn't bristle at the challenge. He just poured himself a cup and sat beside her. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the fire had dimmed to embers, Nanyahhei stepped outside, the wind catching her braid. She found Amos beneath the stars, staring at the totem. He didn't turn when she spoke. "Do you ever think we were meant to meet, that all of this was waiting for us?" Moss took a slow breath, his voice gravel but certain. "No, I don't think the world's that kind. I think we made this." She moved beside him, their shoulders touching. "I think so too." They stood there a long while, silence soft as the wind. Then she whispered, "You ever gonna tell them?" He raised a brow. "Tell who? The town? The world? What happened here? What you did for me?" Amos shrugged. "Stories like this, they're best passed hand to hand. One truth at a time. That's how you keep them honest." She nodded. But before they went inside, she turned and added one last thing. "Well, if we ever tell it out loud, start it with the tree. Not the fire, not the fight. The tree. Because that's where someone made a choice." Amos looked at her quiet pride in his eyes. "I'll remember that." And under the Wyoming sky, where the stars blinked bright above the prairie, two people stood, not as fugitives, not as strangers, not even as survivors, but as something steadier. Home builders, peacekeepers, memory holders. And as the wind moved through the grass, it almost sounded like a song. Not one from the war, not one from grief, but from belonging. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe home isn't where you're from, but where you're finally seen, drop-o in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of love earned, redemption fought for, and peace found in the most unexpected corners of the frontier. We'll see you at the next sunrise.